5 U.S. states saying no to TikTok, on top of lawsuits and restrictions on the Chinese-owned app from around the globe. A nationwide loosening of public health rules in China, while certain risks still linger. The U.S. ambassador to China appealing to American citizens living in China, stock up on food and water. U.S.-China trade dropping. U.S. manufacturing orders from China now down 40%, with freight rates from China to the West Coast plunging 90%. And Beijing boosting ties with Saudi Arabia. An energy-focused visit is happening in the country, and the U.S. is watching closely. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. More U.S. states are saying no to social media app TikTok. On Wednesday, Texas became the latest state to ban the popular video sharing app from its government devices, following Maryland, South Dakota, South Carolina, and Nebraska. Maryland's governor applauded the action in a press release. Referring to the app, he said there may be no greater threat to our personal safety and our national security. TikTok is owned by Chinese tech company ByteDance. Due to China's party-state system, Chinese companies are largely controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. FBI Director Chris Wray says Beijing can therefore use the app's recommendation algorithm and collect user data if it wants to.
The idea of entrusting that much data, that much ability to shape content and engage in influence operations, that much access to people's devices, in effect to that government, is something that concerns us.
ByteDance has said it wouldn't provide Beijing with the data, and that U.S. officials' concerns are fueled by misinformation. But TikTok is facing more than state-level restrictions. Lawsuits also await the company. Indiana filed 2 suits against TikTok on Wednesday, alleging the platform misled consumers about its content and data security. It also takes issue with the platform's influence on children, saying it exposes them to content that includes drugs, alcohol use, and nudity. What's more, similar efforts to ban government use of TikTok are ongoing elsewhere around the globe. Taiwan is also restricting the use of Chinese apps on government devices, citing security concerns. Those apps include TikTok and its Chinese version Douyin and lifestyle and social platform Xiaohongshu. TikTok has met with growing opposition in recent years. Nebraska blocked the app on all state electronic devices as early as August of 2020. The U.S. Army also barred the app. The Federal Trade Commission launched an investigation into TikTok's data practices in July, and more action could soon be on the way. On Tuesday, 6 Wisconsin lawmakers called on their governor to pick up the same effort. And Florida's governor signing an executive order banning state purchases of TikTok products and services that link to, quote, foreign countries of concern. A nationwide loosening of public health rules unveiled in China on Wednesday. Among the changes, people sickened with COVID-19 who show mild symptoms can now quarantine at home. That's instead of isolating in hotels or quarantine centers. In response, residents have started stocking up on medicines to battle COVID-19 at home. Certain risks still linger. Local authorities still have the power to lock down a building if a positive virus case is discovered, meaning residents inside may still have difficulties getting food. Before the change, authorities would put whole communities under lockdown for a single infection. Following the news, U.S. Ambassador to China Nicholas Burns appealed again to American citizens living in China. He advised them to store food and water, adding that it's obviously an uncertain time in China as related to the pandemic.
You've seen the way that China, the government here has reacted just over the last week or two in certain parts of the country, loosening up on testing, for instance, in Guangzhou and in Beijing, allowing some people who are infected to quarantine at home, and yet in other parts of the country, very strict lockdown.
Burns believes China is finally at the point of loosening its strict virus rules.
But we think that process may take many, many months. We're encouraging Americans to have enough water, potable water, and food if you do get caught in a lockdown and you're unable to go to a store.
This video was released on Wednesday, the same day Beijing announced the most sweeping changes to its tough anti-COVID-19 policy since the pandemic began. We've been covering how the Chinese regime has forcibly taken people from their homes to quarantine camps, even if they tested negative for COVID-19. Now, a video of a former Communist Party official's daughter opposing these acts is going viral among Chinese netizens. She was trying to protect herself and her pets. Here's a look.
The video shows Liu Xiaoqin, the oldest daughter of a CCP general, picking up kitchen knives from the table. She warned the officials that if they enforce the law violently and do things that are inhuman and devoid of conscience, they will be greeted with a kitchen knife. Liu is the daughter of a general who once served as China's Minister of Public Security and Vice Premier of the State Council. This video is currently blocked on Weibo.
If they want to kill my cat, if they want to drag me to the camps, I firmly tell you, the Constitution grants me the right that if you want to use violence, I have the right to self-defense. I am 75 years old, and I'm not afraid of death. You're law-breaking thugs. You can come to me. If I die, I will take you with me. Anyone who violates the law, breaks into homes, and violently enforces the law, you will be greeted with kitchen knives. I will chop you one by one.
Here's a little more context. In China, back when entire residential communities were locked down, authorities would enter homes and spray everything with disinfectant. In some cases, they threw out food in the refrigerator. And in others, pets like cats and dogs were even beaten to death. Fears over that situation likely drove the woman to defend herself and her pets. A U.S. ally is set to comply with an ask from Washington and curb China's semiconductor making sector. Dutch officials are planning to enforce new controls on equipment exports to China, specifically on gear used to make advanced microchips. Bloomberg News reported Wednesday that the agreement could come as soon as next month. Here's a look at the details.
This potentially aligns their trade rules with U.S. efforts to restrict Beijing's access to high-end technology. Under pressure from the United States, the Dutch government since 2018 has not allowed the country's largest company, semiconductor equipment maker ASML, to ship its most advanced machines to China. That's because the equipment is considered dual use with potential military applications. ASML is a key maker of semiconductor equipment worldwide. Its latest annual report shows about 15% of its revenue last year came from China. It's unclear what the new restrictions mean for ASML's sales to China. Dutch Statistics Office CBS says China is Netherlands' second largest trade partner after Germany. The Biden administration in early October published a sweeping set of export controls, including a measure to cut China off from certain semiconductor chips made anywhere in the world with U.S. tools.
The company ASML is critical to microchip production. Without the machines it makes, manufacturers would not be able to produce a single semiconductor. The machines are used for EUV lithography, a must-have technology for making microchips used in smartphones, cars, and weapons. ASML is the only company making the machines. Right now, it's only exporting low-end machines to China. U.S. logistics managers are expecting delivery delays as they ring in the new year. They say goods from China coming in early January may take longer than normal to arrive. Here's more on what's happening.
According to a CNBC report, it comes as a result of canceled sailings of container ships. U.S. manufacturing orders from China are down 40% as demand collapses. Chinese factories are shutting down 2 weeks earlier than usual ahead of the Chinese New Year, and freight rates from China to the West Coast are down 90% as global trade continues to drop off. Ocean freight contract market prices hit a record low in November. CNBC says logistics firms are warning it could initiate an all-out price war in 2023 with too many ocean vessels and too much container capacity. And central banks around the world are raising interest rates, sparking concerns of a recession.
The world's top importer and exporter of oils are sitting down to bolster ties in a 3-day visit they call Epoch-Making. On Wednesday, red carpets rolled out for China's Communist leader Xi Jinping upon his arrival in Saudi Arabia. 2 conferences will be held that bring at least 14 leaders from the Arab world together, and over 30 trade, economic, and military agreements worth $30 billion have already been signed. That's including a deal signed on Thursday with tech giant Huawei, despite U.S. sanctions against the Chinese firm. Xi's trip signals a deepening of ties between China and Saudi Arabia. But it likely comes at Washington's dismay, a major strategic ally. On Wednesday, the White House said it's not surprised Xi is making such a high-profile visit to the region, and that the U.S. is, quote, mindful of the influence that China is trying to grow around the world. A strong American ally for 8 long decades, Saudi Arabia has become bitter in recent years over U.S. security presence in the region. Likewise, the U.S. has also criticized Saudi Arabia's autocratic governance and poor human rights record. Another disagreement also came up between the two over Saudi's support for oil output curbs. As a result, Russia might have more revenue to fund its war in Ukraine, despite Western sanctions on its economy. Beijing is already competing with the U.S. for influence in the region. Plus, it will also need more Saudi oil as it starts to loosen COVID-19 rules. The U.S. used to be the biggest consumer of the Middle Eastern oil. Today, it consumes only a fraction of that former peak. China is now Saudi Arabia's biggest client and trading partner. The U.S. and Russia are vying for influence and arms sales in Vietnam this week. The 2 powers displayed weapons and aircraft Thursday at the Southeast Asian country's first large-scale arms fair. Vietnam borders China to the north, and it's located next to a strategically significant area, the South China Sea. China has ongoing territory disputes in those waters with Vietnam and other nations, like over the Spratly Islands. As a result, allying with the U.S. is key for the country's security. The U.S. also needs that cooperation to counter China. The arms fair in Vietnam's capital attracted exhibitors from 30 countries. That's including nearly all major weapons producers. China was the only nation to refuse Vietnam's invitation. Vietnam has expressed interest in diversifying its source of military supplies. U.S. Ambassador to Vietnam, Mark Napper, welcomed Vietnam's effort.
Well, I think it certainly represents a new stage in sort of Vietnam's efforts to globalize and diversify and modernize, and the United States, we want to be a part of that.
The ambassador added that the U.S. wants to boost its military cooperation with Vietnam and is ready to discuss its defense needs, especially on maritime capabilities. Russia is by far the main weapons supplier to Vietnam, covering 80% of its needs, but its appeal has decreased in recent months. The Ukraine war could restrict its defense exports, and sanctions could deter potential buyers. Mongolian protesters gathered in the capital on Thursday in temperatures well below freezing. There, they called out alleged Mongolian government corruption relating to China. 8 officials suspected of coal theft have been arrested. Thousands of protesters have organized since Sunday, urging the government to name those responsible for at least 420,000 tons of coal unaccounted for between 2013 and 2019. The government said in October it had discovered the missing coal after comparing Mongolian export data with import data reported by China, its main buyer. The findings have fueled further resentment over surging living costs and inequality. Those issues had already triggered protests earlier this year. According to central bank data, coal generated more than half of Mongolia's export revenue in the first 10 months of this year. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for more than a year. Here's what to look out for in our second half. A medical accident transformed into one of the most complicated issues in China. In the spotlight, the Chinese Communist Party's zero COVID-19 policy and how it's made the West rethink its political and economic ties to China.
I think Apple and a lot of the manufacturers, the Americans who had operations in China, have been effectively rethinking their relationship since 2020. But we also have the Biden administration, which has out-Trumped Trump in his anti-Chinese attitude. He's kept all Trump's tariffs, although he campaigned against them.
We spoke to Milton Israti, chief economist at a New York-based communications firm Vested, to learn more about his take on that and dive into the crucial questions around the confrontation between the U.S. and China. The full episode is available on our partner platform, Epoch TV. To sign up, click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you tomorrow.